Good morning, all those who listen to us online. And so we will start the work in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. So the next is presentation on analytical report on hybrid threats and Ukrainian public security. And Dmytro Shulga, Director of European Program of International Hydrogen Fund, is going to join us. Hennadiy Maksak, the head of Committee of Ukrainian Prism, Andriy Chubyk, executive head, Yulia Tyschenko is going to join us from Independent Center of Independent Research. So Vitalii Martyniuk is going to be first. So dear colleagues, thank you very much for this presentation, for your participation on this presentation. So we have a publication on the hybrid threats experience of EU and Eastern Partnership. So this is committed to developing Ukrainian statesmanship under the global threats environment. So this was done within the social synergy platform, and also we paid much attention to Eastern Partnership, and on Ukrainian side on partnership between Ukraine and EU, as we build the idea of this project, of this publication. We had several issues to resolve. First of all, why hybrid war of Russian Federation is still continues. Is it a reason, something that stands behind the aggressor or Ukrainian side as well? And so secondly, the fact that Russian hybrid aggression has a larger context than just Ukrainian threat. So it is a threat for Western partnership, and we and those countries also react, and we decided to see how European Union is reacting. What do they do? So in our publication, you can see 5 different chapters. The first one is committed to the basics of hybrid aggression performed by Russian Federation. That clarifies current day hybrid threats and to pose to Ukraine and Ukrainian society. This is done in order to create a framework for the future studies, in order to show what is current day threat, what can be used by Russian Federation, and what has to be done about it. Secondly, different gaps in Ukrainian security system that can be or were utilized in order to launch the active phase of hybrid threats and active aggression. We have been able to analyze the current day gaps comparing to previous day gaps, like in 2014, and we see that many mistakes were not resolved. And so we all have also studied the experience of Baltic countries and Poland. Many of them are facing those threats. There are some successes that are described in this publication that we believe can be used. And also we have chosen Moldova, Georgia, and Belarus, Eastern Partnership countries, in order to analyze what is being done by those countries and what can be used by Ukraine. So in Chapter 5, we have published our recommendations on what can be done in order to improve capabilities of our country. So our expert group team are listed as co-authors of this publication, and most of them are here in front of you. Some of them are sitting in the room today. I would like to say thank you to all of our co-authors, and I would like to ask Dmytro Shulga also join us here up the stage, and Yulia Tyschenko. So now all of our authorship team is here to for the next hour. We will be able to lay out for your attention key topics of our publication. So to our speakers, I would say please cover 1 or 2 issues at the most, and stick to the maybe 5 to 7 minutes. So but before we go, let me ask the leader of European program of Vidrodzenia, Dmytro Shulga, please. The floor is yours. Thank you. I would like to say my greetings on the behalf of publication, a successful publication. These are messages from our leading experts in the field. Thank you very much for this good product, informational product, for the platform of Eastern Partnership. This will be also an interesting information to know. The coordinator of this platform will have its say, and we will be able to discuss this further on, and thank you very much. So as we determined the areas of our future studies, we had different ongoing conversations, and so we decided to pursue several areas. First, state capabilities, then legal capabilities, informational security and cybersecurity, economical sector, energy sector, history, between like ethical ethnicities, between ethnicities and political parties. And so Mykhailo Honchar, the Center for Globalist Strategies, 21. Hello for our center, Globalist Center 21. This was a continuation of a series that we performed, of researches that we have performed before. So it was committed to studying non-military components of hybrid wars. So you see the result. This red book, the wars of 21st century. And this was implemented by under support of the Vidrodzenia Foundation. Hybrid threats and the context of diplomacy of Eastern Partnership. This became an organic continuation of our previous work. So as we talk about hybrid threats, usually there are issues related to identifying them correctly. So I would like to ask to display several slides that I brought with me. So the global strategy of European Union, approved in 2016, actually is pointing out that some of the key issues for EU along the lines of terrorism, climate change, energy security, etc., are also related to hybrid threats. And so events of aggression against Ukraine on the side of Russian Federation, they have promoted the view in detail understanding of these issues of hybrid threats. And this issue is actually very acute for many different countries. Well, the issue of identification of these threats is, it's like I have what you have here. It's like so many times these threats are not even perceived as threats. So the flowers are depicted here. No matter how good they look, this is a poisonous flower, and as the fact of poisoning, the an individual loses understanding of what is imaginative and what is real. And also that bee, it's an Africanized bee. It's very deadly for human being. It's sort of like Russia today, like propagandistic country machine that is posing a threat. And also Nord Stream. This looks like a business project, and so why Ukrainians and Poles should be against this, when in reality this is a mechanism of corrupting of elites in the European Union, mechanism of controlling of larger portion of European markets. So this is the issue that we're facing. How do we identify the threats? How do we appoint appropriate level of threat, of risks to these threats? And when does this issue becomes a real threat, not just virtual threat? So in this context, looking at Ukraine in general, this is a set of issues that many times not viewed as problematic, or some people say, okay, well, oblonetical oligarchs are controlling that. That's okay. The competition, etc. So this is probably matching European approaches, etc. But then on the other hand, you see that people, each one on their own level, trying to build the monopoly. How and influence the general market, especially when under the European cover, different the funds come in from aggressor country. You have probably heard from Slovak companies like Východoslovanský Elektrárňa. But this is only a cover for capital inflows from Russia under the Slovakian guys. So, in many examples like that can be painted when there's no particular identification, but there are clear actions. And these actions are taken from different directions, but very coordinated. This creates an effect of creation of vulnerabilities in defense of the country, in the economics of the country. And what we are facing is that we facing the destructive influence. And so that's the point, to activate the destruction from the inside. So this destruction is occurring from the inside and not from the outside necessarily. So many people looking at the Minsk process, de-escalated the situation at the east, etc., etc. Right now we only face there's some minor issues, fewer people die, etc. But Minsk process, through this de-escalation mechanism, activated what we have called the intra-phase, when aggressor is aiming at ruining the country from the inside. So we are going through this stage of self-destruction, when political forces, instead of just finding consensus and moving forward, We are consumed by war of everyone against everyone. So, this can, you can read about this in our reports and available on the website. So the recipes, I cannot call it recipes, but nevertheless, the conclusions, the lessons that we write about are the lessons from the situation of 2014, the situation when Russia was preparing for this war with Ukraine, and in a way we experienced this deja vu moment when our neighbors in Europe, they begin to understand actually what is happening. Eastern Partnership countries, they understand. Actually, it's harder there because it's depending on the position of the country. If we, the benefit of Ukraine, if we want to win this war, we need to understand that and make the government to oppose those algorithms of the aggressor effectively. And so the article published recently is showing the military components of hybrid wars. We wanted to show non-military components of the hybrid wars, and my colleagues will share more on this.
Andriy Maksak, he was not only the co-author of our publication, he is the national coordinator of Ukrainian platform from Eastern Partnership, and he also dealt with the difficult section, that is cybersecurity, and in Ukraine and in other countries when they speak about hybrid threats, mainly they're speaking about propaganda. Thank you, Vitalii. First of all, I would like to greet you with this book. This is a systemic product, and it creates a map of the perception of hybrid war. As a head of the platform, I wanted to present this product in other countries of Eastern Partnership and also in Brussels to show that we elaborated such a product, why it is so important. So if we take it at the level of the European Union, unfortunately in the European capitals they do not always understand the aspects of this hybrid war, and three main aspects of this war. We understand it because information influence is part of other types of instruments, political, economic, and other instruments. And in Europe, they perceive it as a separate instrument in order to influence the situation. They perceive it separately, not as a part of a bigger process that has many more instruments. Also, information security is associated with the information space, but our Ukrainian experience shows that, unfortunately, there were narratives created concerning history, humanitarian policy, religious issues, regional identities. So all other policies that should have been separated from information security, they became the part of this big process. And our task is to show and to explain in the capitals of the European Union and in Brussels that they should have a comprehensive view on this. And our biggest task is to prove that the level of cooperation in security between the EU and Ukraine and the Eastern as part of Eastern Partnership or on bilateral basis, it doesn't cover all the areas that are really important for us. Unfortunately, here we do not have proper understanding, and we believe that we will continue to work in this direction. Information security, we analyzed many factors, what is done at the level of bodies of power and at the level of civil society, and you know about the active role of civil society. Stop Fake Initiative, Info Resistance, and they motivated the state to act in this direction. But we continue, unfortunately, to see that even in Ukraine, this issue of information security, it is not properly elaborated. There is no proper coordination that is needed between the governmental bodies, between the central bodies of executive power, concerning implementation of the doctrine of information security that was adopted at the beginning of the last year. And this influences badly, and it hits those instruments that could be more efficient. And you know that as BU banned some journalists to come here, the Ministry of Information Policy asked them for a report why it is so. So we should pay more attention, and there should be more cooperation with civil society initiatives. So in Ukraine, we analyzed the initiatives that work in information security sector, those who deal with different areas. And one more peculiarity that differentiates us, we have 4 main directions of in the sphere of information security. We work in our territory, we are trying to counteract, and also our work in temporarily non-controlled territories, Crimea and part of Donbass, and these are separate areas. There are separate instruments and narratives that should be elaborated, separate tactics of cooperation, and those countries that are on the orbit of Russia, and Russia promoted its own narratives, and also we had we analyzed the messages, the narratives in the Eastern European countries, and we were not surprised, but for other countries maybe they didn't notice that there were narratives that some countries should the majority of negative narratives were connected with Ukraine. They said that Ukraine is failed state, that here there is corruption, and these issues were raised. That's why the work of Ukraine should be intensified to counteract through our embassies in those countries and through our governmental bodies. This work is only at preliminary stage, and we should work with European and Western partners, and the elections in Czech Republic and in Germany that happened in Austria, they show that populism, the wave of populism, they're connected with some messages that were introduced, and unfortunately Ukraine is not highlighted in a good way there. So we should carry out our work. We should not only respond, we are in delay in our approaches, and we should provide our own narratives, but we should carry out an in-depth work, and there is a concept to popularize Ukraine in the world that was adopted. The strategy was adopted in 2016, and one of the first points in the plan for the implementation of the strategy is we should understand the perception of Ukraine by European states, and this work is not done systemically, and if we don't have proper material, it is difficult to elaborate the instruments, and there are issues that need our attention. And I believe that if we raise this issue at the level of Brussels and the capitals of the West, so maybe we will have good results. Maybe there will be some more steps in order to increase our information security. In the framework of the project, in August 2017, we surveyed 40 experts, and the majority these are the Ukrainian experts in the sphere of politics, economy, security, and we asked when the aggression of Russian Federation against Ukraine started, and we were provided with several answers. They said about February 2014, but also there were other time parameters. For example, after Ukraine gained independence in 1991, many experts mentioned this date about the Minsk speech of Putin in 2007, or with the first gas war of Russia against Ukraine, and large-scale war in 2005, 2006, and 2009, and with the blocking of Ukrainian export in 2013. And in principle, if we look at the answers of the experts, Russia, right at once of the collapse of the Soviet Union, first unconsciously, and then consciously, they opposed Ukrainian independence, and they also acted in an energy and economic component that was studied by Andriy Chubyk. We are giving the floor to Andriy. Good afternoon.
Yes, I believe this is correct observation that there are different approaches to identify the date of beginning of the aggression. One of the options is to see like the decision supported by the past President Yeltsin on reintegration of Soviet space, geographic space. So majority of you knows this legal initiative in Russia. I believe it was 1994 when it happened. So for Ukraine in particular, I believe contain the signing of the agreement on the extension of Russian fleet staying in Sevastopol in Crimea. So that has been related to the debts of Ukraine before Russia for gas, and so Russia has pushed this through, and we see that on Russian end, this work has been done systemically on a large scale on different fronts. And so in my research, I was able to review energy and economy as sectors where Russia had used to infiltrate Ukraine, to obtain control over key assets, to obtain full control in order to use the proper instruments of influence on its own time, on its own agenda, in order to influence Ukraine, making it weaker. So within the same systemic framework of actions. So on my from my perspective, this threat still does exist. 2019 may become another important year for us when Russia can use multiple components of attacking Ukraine. Not necessarily we're talking about military intrusion, etc., but this may be energy attack under the support of informational attack, maybe economics attack upon economics, and maybe military attack that aiming to obtain chaos, social unrest, and in order to overcome Ukraine as an enemy for Crimean leadership, Kremlin leadership. I'm sorry. So we see current day state politics as not sufficient. There are no particular abilities to retain the successes in the gas sector. So if the state and then the corporate level successes have helped us to diversify the supply of natural gas, and Ukrainian economy is now has enough gas for its own needs. So still we see another thread on minimizing transit. That means not only a decline in incomes for Ukrainian state, but also reconfiguration of gas supply routes for EU, for Europe in general. And so this is still an acute issue. This issue is not resolved still. This is still in theory. We base this upon different communication we had with different governments, with different corporations, but stress tests do not even show the analysis of threats that we have identified. So in Ukraine, this issue persists. The conflict between Naftogaz and Ukrainian government still persists, and there's no contractions on bypassing pipelines being built by Russians, but we see this as a little war inside of Ukraine. So Ukraine is not unfortunately strengthened its position on supply of oil and oil products. We're still very much dependent on oil and oil products. Our resources are not at the best level. The situation is still undetermined on Odessa oil refinery. Only Kremenchuk oil refinery works more or less well, plus Shchebelinka is providing enough fuels that is actually a secondary resource of the oil production. Of course, we observe dependency in nuclear energy production. We are yet to begin the work on promoting and supporting energy efficiency. These issues are long overdue, and some of the laws have been implemented already, and we need to enforce them. So, based on complex evaluation of threats, we were able to lay out several observations that must be taken to attention on the state level. First of all, there should be a vertical of administrative vertical administrating the energy sector. On our hand, on this has to be a line subjected to Vice Prime Minister that can effectively partner with law enforcement agencies and entrepreneurs and companies in the regions. Secondly, the plans must be developed for actions on in case of emergencies. So even now, we need to identify the mechanisms of counteractions. Should Russia will go large scale on cutting the gas or cutting electricity, cutting the oil and oil products, or refuse to supply nuclear power, nuclear fuel. So we need to have plans on how do we provide for security of Ukrainian citizenships how we last through the critical periods of time. So it's good if we have plans for counteraction for several weeks, to last us several weeks. It's better when we have those plans for several months. Also, legislation must be improved on the energy sector. Right now, we believe the work on actions, energy strategy is being done for emergency actions all the way through 2020. Ministry of Energy is working on that. I believe they are finishing this very constructively sometime soon. Also, we need to implement ongoing critical evaluation of Ukrainian energy networks to counteract different emergency scenarios. Critical influences like diverse cyber threats, cyber attacks, or how these networks may be working in automated mode or quickly reacting to emergencies. Also, economical factors. We know that Russia, directly and indirectly through offshore structures, trying to control Ukrainian market. Maybe some of it is not so obvious, but we still have a question of how do we counteract this factor. One of the easiest aspects, I would say, it's action of unions at the larger larger corporations. Many times unions are used to influence, like we did see it in the coal industry, to lobby interests of the oligarchs and not actually the workers of that particular company. We also need to make sure that the internal economic situation is improving. That means that we need to change the approach on business climate, offering more opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses. In this way, we can improve the conditions of Ukrainian citizens, and instead of just helping through subsidies, etc. So it's better to empower people, giving them fishing rods and teaching them how to fish instead of just feeding them day after day after day. So thank you. So hybrid threats are also influencing Ukrainian society at large, and this is what we have felt. And so in situations like that, this society both acts as a object of aggression and also as an instrument in the hands of the aggressor. So aggressor is using different contradictions and sometimes building into those contradictions, trying to make situation worse. And as a key important part of our research was committed to analyze ethnical and inter-ethnical and interactions, and so Yulia Tyschenko will talk more about this.
I agree with you with the emergence of this research, and this is really in-depth research. I had a rather limited task. I believe that it was really important at the same time. I tried to understand those non-military means of influence that have been used for a long time, and they directly and indirectly used this soft force, and this was the preparation for more active actions by Russia, and we can analyze the dates of the start of those events that led to this war. But for me, I understand that this is started in 1991, 1992. Remember about the restoration of Crimea autonomy and the support of political and public organizations that carried out this policy and delivered pro-Russian discourse. And for many years they used for this stakeholders who were proxy organizations, those organizations that implemented this influence on diverse Ukrainian society. There can be many different characteristics of the society. We may speak about plural society, we may say multifaceted society, the society that has some lines of division concerning language, concerning issues of historic memory, also ethnic factor is used. And if these issues, they maybe not take the first places in the research, but they can easily become the factors for mobilization of people, and this is connected with the identity, group and individual identity. These issues are really important, and they can be manipulated, especially if politicians want to do this and stakeholders want to do this. But if we are speaking about civil society organizations, we have thousands of them, but proxy NGOs, maybe they are not in the majority, but maybe I underestimated first the importance of this problem, because during the last year we see the use of this proxy organization. Some of them are really fake. In many cases they are fake, and they are used to describe situation in Ukraine negatively, and also to show the division that exists in Ukrainian society. We may remind about absolute fake information that was spread about Bessarabska People's Republic that emerged last year, and also we may remind the use of different materials about national minorities. Some Hungarian organizations said about autonomy, but this information at that time was provided to society. Also, we may remember about the situation in Crimea in autumn. There was the meeting of Ukrainian diaspora, and this was really interesting, and they presented this as the support of Ukrainian culture by Russia. But if you look at those participants who took part in those events, information picture, propaganda picture was created and was actively used. And these were the representatives of Russian organizations that theoretically could emerge in Ukraine, or they could have Ukrainian names, but they said about what was going on in Ukraine, and this influenced the information background in the occupied territory. So these fakes, they are introduced we may say weakly, and these proxy organizations are actively used in the hybrid war. And also political parties use, it was really systemic. We may remind about different memorandums, official memorandums about the parties of Party of Regions with Russia, the creation by different politicians, for example, Azarov, to create anti-fascist forum. This is also, there was some information about it in the media, and there were many instances when Russian oligarchs, politicians, stakeholders directly influenced Russian unity in Crimea, and they used the direct citations, and there were open sources on this. From one side here we may see fake things that are non-military, but they form this influence, and also we have concrete examples of the use of political parties or some civil society organizations or initiatives in this influence and in carrying out this agenda. And also they actively use such things connected with the language policy. And it's not a secret that in the rhetorics of the first days of occupation of Crimea, and then it was also used. These were the they said that they needed to support and protect Russian-speaking population, and this problem was non-existent, but still they used this issue. So we should build our strategy of work with minorities, with ethnic minorities, with representatives of different language groups, and we should maximally neutralize such influence. And there were negative situations, and I believe that they are not directly related to hybrid war. For example, language issue in the law on education, and this is the practice of consultations, dialogue, transparent consultations, taking into account different opinions, even if we don't like them. So this is the opportunity to neutralize really powerful influence that comes from Russia or from those political forces in other countries that are financed, supported by Russia, their influence on this environment. So I believe that, of course, energy and economy is important, but the most important that there are topics introduced in the information sphere, and these messages, they can reinforce these lines of division, and they can in this way destabilize the situation. And this is the methods of the hybrid war, the method of propaganda. These methods are really widespread, they are different. For example, the evident manifestation of propaganda is the news that are provided to occupied territories. So they say that everything is good, that everything is on the rise there, and if you open information about what is going on in Ukraine, they speak about crisis, about collapse. So this, they present information in such a way. This is a systemic approach. And if you look at Ukrainian news, you may see not so positive picture. And this is the method of provision of information, and it influences the perception of people, it influences the sentiments of people. And we should take such things into account in the social process and the social dialogue concerning the most important issues connected with hybrid influences as the means to achieve the goals in a non-military way.
Thank you, Yulia. Now is a good time for questions and answers. Please offer your short comments, and don't forget to introduce yourselves. It's an interesting, quick comment. I see. Sorry. Please. Quick comment. I see that the definition of hybrid threats is has become a part of our live politics, and is going here to stay. So I just had an idea that a new definition has to be employed. Is hybrid relations of the countries that are in the war and the conditions of the wars, because as a definition, a hybrid war and hybrid threats, it's logical. But it's also can be manipulated and used by the people in power, because otherwise it's difficult to explain how come we have such big trading relationships with our aggressor country. How come citizens that travel back and forth and to work in Russia? I have a question. On May 27th, there was a treaty signed on friendship, partnership, and cooperation between Russian Federation and Ukraine in 10 years. In 1998, Ukraine has ratified this agreement. In December, Russian Federation has also ratified this. In 2008, after the ratification of this agreement was extended in 2018. There will be end of this 10-year of negotiated contract on friendship and partnership. According to this agreement, at least 6 months in advance, the country that is unwilling to continue has to submit a written request to discontinue this agreement. So do you have any information related to the fact that when Ukraine has actually called Russia as an aggressor, will it, according to the conditions of this agreement, submit a written request to discontinue this this contract, this agreement that is looks absurd and under the current conditions? Thank you. That's a great question. I can tell you that I have not heard anything about this, but it seems like Ukrainian official part of the government is not going to do this, and the logic is hybrid here. So it also shows us that under the hybrid war conditions, the hybrid reaction will may create an opposite result. So this is in the way, as we talk about the hybrid threats in the hybrid war, we can also think about along the lines of hybrid peace. So, but we're not actually talking about definitions, although it's important. I would probably suggest that to all of us, our 400 plus deputies, people's deputies, actually recommended a good book by Grigory Pilipilitsa, Ukraine and Russia in the conditions of coexistence. So this is a good book to understand Russian policy related in relations to Ukraine. So what is war? Is continuation of policies with different means. So hybrid wars means hybrid means. So we need to be clear at the social front. With relation to the government in the position it's going to take, you understand the mechanisms that they are facing. So our task, and one of the tasks that we have had in the process of this work, so is to show the passive course that we are facing today and its threats. So Helen Grant has published his article and made it available just recently. We talk about military aspect and necessity of active defense. In the same way, we talk about necessity of changed approaches, because the current day approaches will lead us nowhere. The winning the hybrid war, it does not necessarily mean covering the territory of Ukraine with Russian military forces. Well, if you read Sutyagin, his greatest task is to take under control. Yeah, our task is to maximize the price for the aggressor. So in this context, hybrid peace may not be an end to hybrid war. So the work of American experts, Wesley Clark, Philip Clark, and Olbrong, and Sutyagin, British expert, they show that Russian military forces are prepared for aggressive actions, not only against Ukraine. It will not be a kinetic war necessarily, but it will be combined efforts in different areas that I have mentioned. So going back to your question, whether or not we will have any steps on officials' part from Ukraine to discontinue this agreement, I doubt that. But we may force the government to make the necessary steps, as it was in the past. Igor Taransky. Thank you. Shortly, it's not very pleasant to me to be here in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. It was created 4 years ago under the very crisis situations. Maybe we should rename it into Ukrainian Media Center. That's it. So this is the question toward the management of the media center. So I believe the war against Ukraine has started in 1605, when Bogdan Khmelnytsky has actually told Buturlin that he is intervening into internal affairs of Ukraine. And so my question is toward Hennadiy Maksak, who is also part of civil board. So 2017 has passed, and so based on the article that was recently published in Mirror of the Week, so Klinken has actually published an article on achievement of Ukraine in 2017, and also superficial analysis of our president, and also the movie on that was shown on Ukrainians' participation in Ukrainian participation in the Security Council of Europe. So it was about nothing. It's just about everything and nothing at the same time. So, how do you think current day political activities of Ukraine, are they actually matching up to the necessities of the moment? Yes or no? Yes, thank you very much. Hennadiy Maksak, it's hard to answer it in a simple way. First of all, I would like to introduce you to Ukrainian Prism report that will also provide our evaluations with regard to different directions of Ukrainian activities, especially as a member of European Security Committee. And our understanding is not always matching the understanding of the official government. So several things. We are on the different pages with different diplomats in relation to strategic vision of external policies of Ukraine. There are no policies, no concepts, no guidelines, no practical understanding of what has to be the Ukrainian external policy in general. There are some criteria that were mentioned 2 years ago, but this is definitely not a vision, definitely not a strategy. So as we don't have any strategy, I can only tell you what has been done, has not been done. We, as a member of Council of Security Council, we tried our best. The General Assembly, the Security Council, has done as much as we could. So, and just in general, we also see the issues really in the way the ministry is working and positioning Ukraine in the world. And there's many gaps that need to be filled with relation to the work of Exterior Ministry. Thank you. Another question. Natalia Slobodan, Security Expert Center. I have a question. Let's say the war has started 4 years ago, hybrid war. So over the past 4 years, were there any success stories of Ukraine actually succeeding in counteracting the hybrid attacks? And also, if I may comment on on fake NGOs and fake centers, etc. So this is what I view on different discussion platforms. Whenever Ukrainian experts come, they don't popularize Ukraine. They just whine about internal issues. And it will be very interesting to implement solidarity Polish experience when they decided to just keep their mouths shut on international level without ever criticizing their country on international platforms. So I believe this is what we need, what we lack. It's outside of issues, we also need to show our victories, maybe partial, but victories in overcoming those issues. Thank you. I would like to comment on this related to achievements, not big wins. So I have studied a military area. So in 2014, there was very little understanding of territorial counteraction and security. For instance, there's no legal background for this. For me, I still do not understand those territorial security forces. How will they use? What will be the legal basis for them to use military force? With regard to wins and victories, if we talk about different areas, there are different victories as well. So we can, a lot more can be done, but we can see the progress in restored broadcasting at the temporarily occupied zones. Also, talking about fake organizations and NGOs, I would probably not compare the experts who discuss issues that are real with fake organizations. So, because these are two different things. So, what we know about Bessarabia People's Republic, this is an information that was disapproved. So that means that next time the journalism will be more careful in verify the information prior to rebroadcasting it. So Stop Fake, in partnership with other organizations that do study this. So even in the fact that some of the government officials are trying to communicate with different stakeholders on related to some like issues that are not convenient, like language issues, educational issues, and trying to resolve those issues. I understand the controversy of this idea, like, well, should we criticize the government or not during the war? But I believe we need to. So drawing the balance, drawing the balance between the country and the government. We have tried to keep this balance as much as possible. Yes, I agree with this. But many times, victory won is not war won. So with Novorossiya project, Russia wanted to detach 8, maybe 10 regions of south and east of Ukraine. No, it has not happened. So this is another one. So they have got control over 2 parts of 2 different regions. Ukraine has survived the military coup. If you remember the raid of end of June, end of July, there was a raid of our mobile brigades, and so we lost that chance. So this Americans, they say that this was unprecedented. So we are talking about a systematic approach. We had a military chance, and we have decided not to use it. Pure diplomacy is only successful when you have strong position in informational, military areas, diplomatic areas. Then any diplomat will feel well and confident. So in this context, it will be very important to reevaluate the events and reevaluate the actions of Russia. I don't believe they're any new. The fact that Russia is doing today in other countries is just working according to the same approaches. They will be used against Ukraine again. So look at Poland, look at Belarus. Where do you see the war of hybrid type? With Belarus, it's more or less clear when Belarus is total partner of Russia, but and so Russia is trying to kidnap citizens, Ukrainian citizens on the territory of Belarus. So this clarifies that Belarus is a solid ally of Russia. So look at situation with Poland, they are acting differently. But if you remember Zhirinovsky and his proposal to sort of divide Ukraine between Poland, Belarus, and Russia, and whatever. So what was made as a proposal on the Polish political forces, it begins to take root. So this makes for the Western Front of this war. So this situation makes us mobilize on the level of society and on the level of this country, but the level of our mobility is also dependent on how active we are going to be forcing the state institutions to not be so excited about their diplomatic wins because there are so few, but moving toward serious scenarios that unfortunately still on the table. And so political and the Polish approach in this regard is very telling. Like in energy area, we need closer partnership between Poland and Ukraine for to counteract the Nord Stream 2. So this is current day partnerships. We will not be able to find a very stable partner, more or less, but more or less our situational allies may work, because in some situations with Poland, between Poland and Ukraine, you see conflicts, but certainly there are other areas where we can partner. And so this may result into may work as a counteraction of this plan of aggressor who works against us and against Poland at the same time.
If we are speaking about successful steps, so information area, the first such step that we properly provided information about the downing of Boeing, and this was the joint effort of and the investigation group and that investigated this case, and also the another important issue where we also provided information successfully. We launched this FTA, and Russia tried to counteract, to pressure us in this, and in the information area we properly communicated this issue, and also an issue of Eurovision and participation of Russian singer in it. You remember that they try to play with this issue, and the second is the engines for Korean missiles, and we properly communicated in the media about this issue. So there are positive examples, but unfortunately at the strategic level I do not see that this is a constant process. About the platforms and the AGOs, the participation of experts, we have a problem in this, and at this moment, during those years we have been working, I do not remember such platforms where we would coordinate this information activity among stakeholders. We have our communication channels with the West and in other countries, but coordination of efforts is necessary, but we didn't reach this. And different organizations can provide information and provide information in their own way. And for example, in Brussels, there can be, for example, 5 events, and every stakeholder brings information in their own way. So we should speak about problems with reforms, but when we are dealing with security issues and defense issues, the policy and messages should be much more coordinated. Thank you, Gennadiy. And lastly, so at the end, I would like to say that on our site, we will have an electronic version of our publication. You can download that, you can spread it, you can use it in your work, in your research. I would like to thank International Renaissance Foundation and the European Union for support of our project, the project Synergy, and we thank the Forum of Civil Society of Eastern Partnership. We would like to thank the team of our project, all those who participated in the implementation, and the Ukraine Crisis Media Center for providing this platform where we were able to present our research and to discuss it. And we are open, and you can find our contacts on the site, and if you have questions or comments, please, we will consider all this, and we will be glad to continue this dialogue with all stakeholders. Thank you.